talking about your work in New York. You also did NBC News at Sunrise.
Yeah, I mean, I filled in for that. I would fill in when Joe Whitty, the NBC News at Sunrise weather anchor would take off, so I'd fill in for that. I'd fill in on the Today Show. I did the 5, 6, and 11. So there were some weeks. There was one 2-week stretch I always remember where I did NBC News at Sunrise, I did the Today Show, I did the 5, 6, and 11. So I was a bit of a zombie when that was over, but that didn't happen that often.
Let's talk about the Today Show and how you started on that.
Well, I started filling in for Willard in 1987, and again, I knew him, and he was put in a word for him. He said, "Look, I mean, up until that point, they were using like different weather people from the owned and operated stations, kind of as a perk, a little reward, and I think it just happened to coincide with a little downturn in the economy, and they were trying to cut costs, and they thought, well, why are we flying these people in and putting them up in a hotel when we can use this guy who's here and doesn't cost us anything?" So I started doing that, and then in September of 1987, they started the Sunday Today Show, and I got tapped to do that. And the original cast was, the anchors were Boyd Mattson and Maria Shriver. Garrick Utley was the newsreader. Bill McAtee did sports, and I did the weather. And it was an interesting, we were trying to do they wanted to do kind of a more upbeat CBS Sunday morning. And we had longer pieces, but, with a little more zip, as it were. We never beat, obviously, CBS Sunday morning, but we had a good time. And in that period of time, there was this rotating cast of characters that happened. I mean, and for a long period of time, I think I did it for 8 years. I was on the show for 8 years, and I was doing the 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news, and filling in for Willard. But Bill McAtee left, and Garrick Utley became the anchor, and Jimmy Cefalo became the sports anchor, and I was the weather guy. Then then Maria Shriver left, and Mary Alice Williams came in, and we moved the show to Washington, D.C., because they were, again, trying to save some money. They looked, okay, on Sunday, we have a studio in New York we have to open up for 8 hours. We have a studio in Washington, D.C. that we open up for 8 hours for Meet the Press, but we only used for that, at the time, I think Meet the Press was only a half hour. And they ran the numbers and thought, it's cheaper for us to fly the anchors and the producer to Washington, put them up in a hotel, drive them to and from the studio, pay for their meal, and then fly them home, than to do it in New York. So for a year and a half, almost 2 years, we did the show, the Sunday Today Show, out of Washington, D.C. And so, I was doing the 5, 6, the 11, filling in for Willard, and then flying to Washington on Saturday, doing the show Sunday, and then flying back. So it was a pretty hectic schedule.
Did you ever think about calling it quits, or?
No, because it was a job, and eventually they moved it when they decided to start the Saturday Today Show, and they could amortize the cost of the Today Show studio across 7 days. They thought, okay, let's move it back. And at that point, I switched off of the Sunday show and moved to the Saturday show, but still filling in for Willard. Then in '96, I got a call from my agent. He came in to the studio. I was getting ready for the 5 o'clock news, and he said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "Okay." He goes, "No, not here." So we went to the men's room, and he checks under the stalls, and he says, "They want you to replace Willard." I said, "What?" Because they say Willard has come to them and he wants to cut back. What should I tell them? I said, "Well, I got to call Willard first." I said, "Let me try to reach him." And I reached him that evening, and I said, "Look, I just got a call. I just got a visit from my agent." He goes, "Yeah." He said that I want to step down. I said, "Yeah, is this true?" Or he goes, "You know what? It's time to." I said, I don't want to work as hard, and I figure if I step down now voluntarily, I can get a pretty good deal with them because I still want to keep my feet in. And I think, hopefully they're going to come to you for the job. I said, well, they did, but I wanted to make sure this is what you want, because if this isn't what you want, then I don't want this job. He said, no, brother, it's your, go for it. He goes, my time's kind of come and gone. It's your time. I said, well, okay. And so I got the job. But what kind of helped the transition was that up until that point, first, about 2 years before, Willard started taking Fridays off. Then he started taking Mondays off. And these were during non-sweeps months. And some weeks he was taking, Thursday, Friday, Monday off. So I was on constantly. And what we did was we just decided, and I always thank my agent for this, guy named Alfred Geller. He begged NBC, so don't put out a press release, don't say anything. Let's just let it happen. And it took place in January of '96 was when I started full time. And it really wasn't until March that they started getting calls, like, "Where's Willard?" Because the people were just used to seeing me, so they just, I guess, assumed Willard was on vacation, and it was a pretty seamless transition, which I think is the hallmark of our show. We've always had pretty seamless transitions from personnel changes because we don't kick people out the door. It's kind of just a normal progression in a sense.
Was there a point that you felt, wow, this is where I belong? I'm completely part of the Today Show now?
I guess. I mean, it's still kind of heady stuff, that you're on the Today. I mean, it wasn't anything it wasn't even anything that was a career goal. I mean, my career goal, I thought if I could get the 5, 6, and 11 at WNBC, at the flagship station of NBC, I'm done. I'm good. This is, I can retire from this, try to hang on as long as possible. Because look, if you look at Chuck Scarborough and Sue Simmons are probably, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet good money that they're the longest running local anchor team in the country. Not just New York City, but I think in the country. Is anybody? I would bet you good money that because they've been together now 27 years. I don't think there's another anchor team that I mean, not in L.A., not in Chicago. So in any event, it would have been an honor to still be working with them. I'm still sometimes it's like I'm on the Today Show. It's kind of weird. It's like it's not. It's not something you plan for, and so when you get it, it's you're kind of like I'm on the Today Show. I mean, there was nothing to sneeze at being on News 4 New York, but you're also to be on the Today, and I did the 5 and the 6 o'clock news, and the Today Show for I think 2 years, and then finally I think it was in '97, I stopped doing local.
Now, how did your role change on the Today Show as you moved on?
Well, it's there's the weather job, the weather part, and doing the remotes and stuff like that. But I've been very fortunate that the executive producers have allowed me to do other things than just weather, to do reporting, both silly and sublime, hurricane coverage, forest fires, wildfires, tornadoes. But we do a thing called Lend a Hand Today, 5 cities, 5 charities, 5 days. I recently got to interview the First Lady, covering the Oscars, the Emmys, the Grammys. You name it, we've gotten to do it. The Olympics, having a fairly decent role in that. On our third hour, I'm one of the co-hosts of that. So it's been a slow expansion of defining what the weather person does on the Today Show.
Are you able to suggest what you'd like to do?
Sure, sure. I mean, I have producers who, or who say, "Hey, do you want to do this?" But also, I'll see a story and say, "Yeah, this might be kind of interesting," and they say, "Good, let's go for it." So it's a nice balance, and it's good to have other people suggest stuff, because there are things that you might not do, but that take you out of that comfort zone and allow you to stretch a little more. So I welcome that.
Can you give me examples of some of your favorites?
Boy, it's and then you can't remember them. But I got to climb the George Washington Bridge. I mean, as a kid, I always wondered, do they climb up those cables? And they do. That's how they do maintenance work and stuff. And I got to do that. I mean, that was like a dream. I mean, I'm a kid from New York City, and you go over the bridge, and here I am climbing the North Tower, and you're 650 feet above the water. I mean, it's a hell of a view. I got to interview my idol as a cartoonist. I got to interview Charles Schulz twice. I got to interview him on the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of Peanuts, and then it was announced that he was diagnosed with terminal colon cancer. And about 3 weeks before he died, I got a call from his wife and said he'd like to do one more interview. Would you come out and do it?
Do you know why he chose you?
I think because I respected his art, and I think I was a fan, and I think he was pleased with the first interview, that being or at least wanting to be a cartoonist. I kind of got what he did, so I think he trusted me, and I was honored to take that trust and hopefully present a balanced portrait of him. So it's a job that you get to do things that you never thought you would get to do. Matt and I doing the bobsled, the two man luge. I mean, there's some goofy stuff, but also some fun stuff. It's really a privilege to be on this show.
Is there a typical day for you?
No. Well, I mean, you get up the same time every morning. I get up at 3:15. It used to be a little later, but I now do the Wake Up with Al show on the Weather Channel from 6 to 7. But I get up about 3:15. By 3:45, I'm on the phone and on the internet with our meteorologists, both the Weather Channels and the Today shows. By 4:45, I'm in the building here, hair and makeup. Well, not so much hair. And then I go at 5:30. I go across the street to 30 Rock, do the Wake Up with Al show from 6 to 6:55. Come back, do our show from 7 to 10. If we have to update for the West Coast, 10:30, quarter to 11. If we don't, I leave about 10:20 or so, and then I go work out, and then I have a production company, so I usually go to that for a little while. Try to leave about 2 or so, at least a couple of days a week, so I can pick up my son from school. Get home. I'm trying to train for a triathlon, so I may go for a run or a swim or a bike ride. Make dinner, homework for the kids, and I hit the sack about 9:30 or so. That's an average day.
Wow. Now, when you're on the set of the Today Show, when it's actually going on, beforehand, do you guys talk about what's going to happen for the day?
No, not really. Because everybody's getting ready for the show. Ann and Matt are doing their homework. I'm across the street doing the Wake Up with Al show. Natalie is getting the news together. Putting the finishing touches on the news scripts. So then we come together. We don't. I mean, the show really is a whirlwind. I mean, it's you look at it and you're like, and we do 3 hours. I mean, the other guys do 2. But you're just constantly moving. I mean, it's you get maybe 15 minutes or so in between segments, where you can kind of take a breath, go to the bathroom, make a phone call, and then boom, you're okay. Next here, boom, 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 it's a so you don't get a chance to really talk. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you spend 4 hours, 5 hours a day with people, but when you boil it down, I mean, in between segments, when we're sitting on the couch, we may talk about what's coming up next or what just happened, but we don't get a chance to talk about what we're going to do.
Are there any rules for what you can and can't do on the show?
Can't swear. You should wear pants. Other than that, I don't know that we have other rules. I mean, there's a general, I don't know if it's a rule as much as a guideline. There's a certain amount of, respect that you have for your fellow workers. I don't think you should embarrass a guest, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask a guest tough questions. I don't think you should laugh at people. You should laugh with them. But other than that, I can't think of any other rules.
And when you're covering the weather, when you're actually on site, can you talk a little about that? What that
Well,
experience is like?
it's a on the one hand, there's a lot of adrenaline going because you're alive, anything can happen, and you're in a weather event, so it's sort of exciting, but you have to temper that because these are people's homes, it's their livelihoods, it's their lives that you're talking about. I always love when they say, "Oh, it's a minor fender bender." Well, if it's your fender bender, it's not minor. So you've got to temper your excitement with remembering that you're talking about people's existences. But there's something very visceral about being out in the weather, and whether it's a snowstorm or a hurricane, covering the aftermath of a tornado. It's very powerful. It's what television was, in a sense, invented for. To take people where they can't go, and show them things they normally wouldn't see. And so I think, look, the Joplin tornado is a prime example. And even then, television doesn't really do it justice, because your picture by its very nature is framed by this television screen. But when you're standing there, and in a 360-degree arc, you don't see a building standing. It's pretty powerful. Or you're in Haiti, and you step outside that airport and you see bodies. It leaves a mark. So I've been to a lot, and I've had a lot of great times, and you see a lot of misery. But you never forget that, or you shouldn't ever forget that you're talking about people. It's not just an event. It's an event that happened to people. Otherwise, I think you tend to lose sight of why you're there.
Sometimes when you're actually in those weather situations, there's always on YouTube you see the shots of you blowing away and things like that. How much danger will you put yourself in?
I think I have a pretty healthy dose of self-preservation. Look, anything can happen, but if I think we're in a place or in a situation that we need to get out of, we do. I mean, we were covering a wildfire in Los Angeles, and the police, the fire chief who was with us said, "We got to get out now. And we literally slid down a hill on our butts, just because it was a wall of fire that the wind shifted, and all of a sudden this flame is coming overhead, and we just, but I have no desire, let me put it that way, to perish covering a story, and there may be people who do, but that's not my idea of a good time.
You were at the Today Show on September 11th, 2001.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about that?
It was. I remember saying, "It's a beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky," and then we get word that a small plane flew into the World Trade Center, And I remember seeing the first live shot, and I remember looking and thinking, that seems too big a hole for a small plane. You know, that's just a big hole. And then we're on the air, and we talk, and then the second plane hits, and now it's, what the heck is going on? What, you know, wait a minute, could this be deliberate? I mean, wait, and it just, you know, from there, it just, you know, the sense of dread, and it was, you know, it was one of those days you're never going to forget. And for me personally, it was, and I'm one of those people. I was very fortunate that I didn't know anybody who perished. But for me, in a weird sense, it was like this personal day of tragedy in that it was, my dad had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And he and my mom were living in Queens. And he was supposed to come in for his first chemo session at Sloan Kettering that morning. Obviously didn't make it in. And he went into the hospital October 3rd and died October 30th. And it was this weird feeling because the country was still mourning. But for me, I was like, well, my dad died, you know, and thousands of people's fathers or husbands or mothers or wives or sisters, you know, literally their friend, cousin, you know, brother or sister died. So it was this weird, you know, working on two levels. But you know, that day was just, I mean, I remember coming home, and at the time we were living in a high rise, and seeing, again, it was a beautiful day, but seeing F-16s flying back and forth, you know, it was like, and you know, the smell of smoke, and it took a long time. I don't remember, it might have been, I don't know, a month before we went back outside to do, you know, our normal stuff. Maybe 3 weeks. I can't remember exactly now, but it was, you know, it was a hard, you know, trying to figure out when do you resume normalcy? Can you resume normalcy? Is something going to happen outside our window? You know, it was a really, and it put us off of our ability to do what we did, because we were, you know, I mean, we were this kind of, you know, we do serious news, but we do the fun stuff, the light stuff. Well, nobody felt like doing fun stuff anymore, you know, and it was very difficult. I mean, look, not that it's about us, but it was a, and I think everybody who is in this business was struggling as to what's the balance. How do you do this? So it was tough.
I'm going to ask you just to share a favorite memory or anecdote about some of your colleagues, starting with Matt Lauer.
You know, again, getting to do the luge, the two-man luge with him was, and it was, what was perfect, what was priceless was, conventional wisdom would have been, a two-man luge, I would be on the bottom and he would be on top. But because of gravity and going into turns, the heavier guy has to be on top. So, you know, he wasn't ready for that. And when he heard that, the look on his face was just priceless. It was perfect.
Speaking of heavier guy, you were very public about your gastric bypass surgery. Talk a little about that and how that affected you and your fans.
I don't know how it affected my fans. It was one of those things I knew I needed to lose weight, and I tried everything. And finally I just decided that, you know, this was one, I had to do this. And, you know, it was one of those deals. And I don't mean to, what time do we have to do that?
We have only a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
It's about 5 after.
Okay. Just because I've got another. You know, it was one of those things where I just, you know, people were calling, wanting to know what's wrong with Al Roker. He's losing all this weight. Is he okay? Is he fine? And I said, and I just decided, let me just address this. And you know, I had taped it myself just because I wanted, in case anything had happened. You know, it's a dangerous operation. 1 in 200 people die from it every year, and so we did a special on it. But I don't advocate it. I haven't been an advocate for gastric bypass. It was what was right for me. Would I do it again? Yes, but I don't. I didn't want to be the poster child for bariatric surgery, because again, it's everybody's individual choice, and it's a dangerous deal.
Stop camera for a minute.